Hey, David here with another episode of Scales and Tales, and this is Minor Scale Masteries Part 2. And if you watched, Part 1, I was kind of basically unlocking how the minor pentatonic scale hides in the middle of three really popular and common major scale modes, which happen to be minor scales, the Aeolian, Dorian, and Phrygian modes that come from the major scale. So I'm going to approach this mainly kind of using Aeolian as like a parent scale. And we're going to kind of drift around through, looking at Dorian, looking at Phrygian. We're also going to hint, near the end and kind of shift things toward harmonic minor and melodic minor. Now, we're not going to go very far into harmonic minor and melodic minor in this lesson because we're really just trying to become more familiar with minor scales and some of the alterations to create some of these sounds. So we're going to dive a little deeper into the minor flavored modes, from the major scale. But keep in mind, harmonic minor and melodic minor both have their own modes. And I know when I originally worked on this, I felt like a sense of accomplishment when I finally kind of understood, the modes from the major scale. I was like, oh my gosh, I finally understand this. And now I know what Lydian and Locrian and all these sounds are. And I was actually starting to use, those scales. And then I remembered, discovering that harmonic minor and melodic minor also had modes. And then my brain just exploded, and it was like, oh no, I've got to do all this over again and again and again. Um, so that was kind of a shock, to realize, oh, there are more modes out there. So harmonic minor and melodic minor, they're definitely related. They're all part of this minor scale family. Um, but they're not really derivative from the major scale. Like they're not like, Aeolian, Dorian, or Phrygian. They're kind of separate. The construction's a little different. But we can still relate those scales to the natural minor scale or Aeolian, and that's a good thing to do. The first thing we're going to do here is a concept I've had for a long time. And if you ever studied with me in the past, I think I was looking through some of my materials. I think I've had this since around 2003, 2004. The earliest handouts I could find that I'd created were from around that time. So I've been teaching and showing this to students for a long time. And it's something I call modal drones. And we're going to basically use a droned string to help your ear kind of hear these flavors and sounds. Because I know for me personally and a lot of students I've worked with, the hardest thing about learning scales and modes, whether they're minor or major or whatever tonality they are, is hearing them correctly. Like really hearing what it sounds like. If you're just running the scale up and down and there's nothing being played behind you, your ear might miss a little bit of what you're actually doing. You're going to hear the scale, but you're not really going to hear the application of the scale, or you're not going to hear it in its proper form, I guess you could say. So if you had a loop pedal, like I got a ditto looper right there, I could incorporate into this. You could use a looper, you could record a track, of some chords, and then, experiment and play with scales behind them if you had a friend or a family member or a cat or somebody that could play chords like on a piano or a guitar or something. If you have a cat that can play piano, you should definitely film, yourself practicing this and put it on YouTube. I'd like to see that, but if you don't have a loop pedal, you don't have a way to record yourself, and you don't have a friend or a cat or somebody that can, play chords behind you, then you're kind of, on your own in a way. So I've kind of came up with this idea to help people that didn't really have, the ability or the access to some of those things I just mentioned. If you're finding yourself at home practicing by yourself and you don't have, a friend or someone that can play chords behind you, and you don't have a looper, I don't want you to run out and, have to make a new friend or go buy a pedal just to try this. So what we're going to do is we're going to use basically what's naturally on your guitar, which are these strings. And even though we're not really going to be able to achieve a chord behind you, we can at least give you like kind of a base of operations, or at least a centralized tonality, so you can kind of hear a little bit more of the texture and the flavor and the color of these scales. So that's another reason why I moved to the key of E, so we can conveniently use the low E string. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off with just 1-octave shapes, and then I'm going to move it up to 2-octave shapes, and then from there, of course, you can go to 3-octave, and you can cover the whole fretboard if you want. But the most important thing though is learning this concept, or kind of understanding what we're doing here. So we're going to tap into E natural minor in the 7th position. So we're going to start on the 7th fret on the A string, which is E. And then for E Aeolian or E natural minor, we've got E, F sharp, G, A, B, C, D, E. So it's 1 sharp, F sharp. Now that's the sound of the scale, right? Listen to what it sounds like if we incorporate that low E string and we just use it as a drone. I'm just going to play it almost like a chord in the beginning, but I'm going to let that low E ring like this. And that's kind of helping my ear really hear the sound of that scale. So I'm not worried about shredding, I'm not worried about oppressing anybody. What I'm really worried about is hearing it. So you're definitely going to need to roll back your distortion. I'm going to clean it up just a little bit more, just so it doesn't get all muddy, because distortion and effects and things like that really colorizes the sound, and it can also kind of, hide what you're actually doing from your ear, because you hear this swirl of, distortion or chorus or whatever you're running, and it can become really hard to actually hear what you're playing. So clean it up, use a clean channel if you want. I do like a little bit of grit though, so I don't want to go completely, clean. But once again, that's E natural minor droned with that low E string. And I know for me, when I first started using this concept, it was kind of hard for me at first, because I was so accustomed to muting, and silencing things, that, my hands kind of freaked out when I was trying to drone strings, and not mute. So that's a little weird at first. So there's natural minor, right? Now we can convert that to Dorian just by manipulating the 6th, which we talked about that briefly in the previous episode. So in the key of E minor, the 6th would be C. So in C Dorian, we're going to have C sharp instead of C natural. Right, there's that glorious, Dorian flavor right there, the natural 6th. And then hearing it with that drone string really helps you hear what you've done. Now the last, minor flavored mode from the major scale is Phrygian, and that has a flat 2. It also has a flat 6, so we're going to change that C sharp we just played back to C natural. So if you compare that to the natural minor scale, Phrygian's basically a natural minor scale with a flat 2. That's one of the main reasons why I want to kind of use natural minor as a parent scale, so you can actually see what was altered or changed. And in this case, natural minor to Phrygian, we played with that 2nd, we lowered it a half step. And that's the very distinct Phrygian flavor right there. Right. Now that drone string, once again, it's just kind of helping you hear, what you're doing. It's not as useful as actually, hearing a full chord, behind you, but it's at least giving you a piece of that picture, or a piece of, that tonality. Now, just to be thorough, we can definitely change natural minor to the harmonic minor scale. I mentioned that just a little while ago. So if you think of the natural minor scale, harmonic minor is a natural minor scale with a raised 7th. So the 7th in the key of E is D, and then in harmonic minor, that note would be D sharp, and it would sound like this. And that very distinct harmonic minor sound, right? So drone that. Now if you want to, you could bounce off of, the fretted notes from the scale, and then use that low, ringing drone string. And you could do that through the whole scale. Right? Almost sounds like a Rolling Stones song. Now, and then also, melodic minor would basically be, well, it's basically like a major scale with a flat three, or you could think of it as, Dorian with a raised seventh or a natural seventh. You can think of it a couple different ways. So there's melodic minor. Definitely very distinct. Okay, that was just a brief look at, harmonic minor and melodic minor, and I do have, plans of, diving into those scales and uncovering some of their modal sounds in the future. But one step at a time here. I don't want to get too far, ahead, because I'm going to lose some of you, and I don't want to do that. So we're gonna, talk about harmonic minor and melodic minor, but like I said, I'm going to focus on those in a different episode. So now what we can do is take those one-octave drones that we used for Aeolian, Phrygian, and Dorian, and we can turn those one-octave drones into two-octave drones. So natural minor droned in the seventh position right here would look like this. And like I said, when I first started playing with these droned, scales, it was really weird for my technique at first to allow that string to ring, because I was so accustomed to muting everything. And then suddenly I'm breaking that, habit or tradition and allowing that string to ring. So it might feel a little funny at first, and you might even find yourself, playing a little bit differently, to avoid muting. Like right there, I just hit the low E string, and I didn't mean to, but my hand, just kind of went on autopilot there to mute. All right, now we can convert that to Dorian. In that shape, in two octaves, we could do this. And there you can see I'm using that D and then sliding into, the octave of E right there on the 12th fret. And there's a couple different ways you can travel there. I mean, you could do it this way as well. It just depends on which way you want to fret that scale. That's purely 3 notes per string. Paul Gilbert approved. Or you could do the modified, fingering like that, where you've got 2 notes on the D, and then it goes back to 3 notes per string. Sound. I love Dorian. And the last one here would be a 2-octave version of Phrygian, right? With that lowered, second or flat 2. And you're really just trying to give your ear, something it can latch onto and, relate it to the scale. And it's not the same as having a chord behind you. If you had a, loop pedal or, a way to record yourself or a friend or something, that's the best, the best method. But this is really just kind of something you can do when you're by yourself. Let's say you're playing with an acoustic guitar or something like that, and you don't have, loop pedals and things like that hooked up. This is just a good way you can kind of practice and really pinpoint these scales.